Hello everybody, and welcome to Rest and Reason. I'm RP the Red Panda, and today we're going to be looking at my third game versus game video, Catan versus Machi Koro. You're probably wondering, why these two games, right? You've got this classic game that most people consider to be a resource management game, where you're building up, and then you have this more new, but very popular beginner board game that seems to be just plain old luck. But what connects these two is actually their main mechanic. And their main mechanic is betting production. You see, many people don't recognize that these two games actually have the same exact core of betting production, because betting production works as follows. You start out with something that allows you to bet. In Catan, it's your building. In Machi Koro, it's your two starting cards. So those are your starting bets. And with your starting bets, you hope to get things. Once you get things, you then can place more bets, or you can up your bets. And so in the end, though, they're both the same game. The only difference between the two is that this one is more physical and has several different things you can win by betting. And this one is more card-based, and there's only one thing you can win by betting. Let's go ahead and get into the comparison of these two games. Round 1. Endurance. Replayability. Machi Koro wins! I recently was thinking through really what is replayability all about. And the idea is, the more that I play the game, do I want to continue playing it? Because there are many games where you play it a couple times and then you're done with it. And not that that's a bad game, but that means that it's probably going to just sit on your shelf until maybe either A, there's somebody who's never experienced that before, or B, you give it to somebody else to experience. What I realized when playing Catan recently, and what my whole game group realized, was none of us want to play Catan again. We're done with it. It's incredibly boring because it's the exact same decisions every single game. Whereas Machi Koro, there are several different strategies you can play, and honestly, a lot of times those strategies feel kind of like what people say about communism, where they say, well, true communism's never been tried, so we're going to try it again. And Machi Koro always gives you this hope that that strategy that didn't work last time might work this time, or there's this other strategy you have to try. And so that adds a lot of replayability to the game. Masterability. Machi Koro wins! Which sounds a little bit weird because this game has a lot more, Catan has a lot more to it. So a lot of people would think, oh, that's the more masterable. And there are tournaments for Catan. But honestly, Catan is most similar to poker in its masterability. Yeah, you can master some of the odds and the luck, but ultimately, it does come down to who gets the right rolls in a game. In Machi Koro, because all of the cards connect, and because I believe there are more rolls you get in an average Machi Koro game, the odds even out. So I've seen so many games of Machi Koro where somebody in last place, or considered to be in last place, will come back and win it all, despite everybody counting them out. Whereas in Settlers of Catan, I've basically noticed that every time somebody gets behind, they stay behind, and they pretty much just automatically lose. It's almost never the case that somebody comes back. So that's a sign that somebody with strategy can even out the betting odds eventually in Machi Koro, but they can't in Settlers of Catan. Round 1, Machi Koro wins! Round 2, Design. Novelty of mechanics. Settlers of Catan wins! Settlers of Catan was a groundbreaking game in the betting production area of things, and even in the resource management area of games. It was groundbreaking. Whereas Machi Koro honestly doesn't do much of anything new. It does very, very small things new. So this was an easy one for Settlers of Catan to win, and I think it's one of the biggest reasons people love this game so much is because it was their first love. And even though your first love usually isn't even a good love, isn't even a real love, it's something you're going to remember forever because it was the first time you felt that feeling. Synergy of mechanics. Machi Koro wins! And I've done the actual math on Settlers of Catan, and the math proves that the reason why everybody always seems to need brick and always seems to have more sheep than they want is because literal statistics proves that in the average game of Catan, you are going to have more sheep than you need and less brick than you need. Because they didn't synergize anything about this game. The most important resources are hard to get, the easiest resources to get are useless, and people end up with hands upon hands of things that they have to trade 4 for 1, even though they're getting lucky. Machi Koro, on the other hand, is very synergized. The one currency is one of the biggest reasons Machi Koro succeeds. You have one currency. So whenever you get lucky, you can put that currency wherever you want. Round 2, tie. Round 3, audience, simplicity. Machi Koro wins! The bigger question here was, would I introduce it to a new gamer? And especially older gamers, I would introduce to Machi Koro every day of the week. It's less long, it's less frustrating, and it's just a better puzzle to get people into the board gaming industry than Settlers of Catan, which honestly has about as much luck as something like Monopoly. It only feels like you have less luck because there's more going on than in Monopoly to distract you. Universality. Machi Koro wins! Machi Koro is the game that if I were going, I want this betting production, I'm going to take Machi Koro off the shelf, and that's the game I'm going to play. I'm not going to choose Settlers of Catan. Heck, I might even choose Lords of Vegas if I wanted a more complicated sort of betting production, because that also has some betting production to it. But I would not choose Settlers of Catan, and so it had to be Machi Koro that won this one. Round 3, Machi Koro wins! Round 4, theme, mechanical, Machi Koro wins! But one of the biggest things that actually made me realize that Settlers of Catan didn't do well is that betting production really doesn't feel like what this game was going for. This game was going for something that was a peaceful build-up where you don't conflict with people, where you don't necessarily stress too much. I believe that's really what it was going for based off of the art and the general build-up theme that it has. But yet, despite trying to be almost an engine builder, it ends up being a super duper lucky game where you very often feel powerless to do anything even when you're getting lucky. Whereas Machi Koro, right from the box and the introductory paragraphs, literally tells you, go on in there and bet and try to do the best you can, because all you've got is your trusty dice. And eventually, both of them. And it just has that feel all the way through, and that theme of, oh, this is a town that's happy-go-lucky, and who knows if we'll get the business or production we need to grow. It just feels more thematic in Machi Koro than it does in Settlers of Catan. Artistic. Settlers of Catan wins! It has just fantastic art, and it is a large reason I think this game was successful, is when looking at games like Risk and Monopoly, and even a lot of life board games, Catan came to us and said, look at this warm, inviting, beautiful game that just oozes from its art this theme of you're going out and you're building something in the wild. It's beautiful. It's awesome. Machi Koro has a great almost cubist art, geometric art style that's very minimalistic, has a lot of really cool details, and really accentuates its theme a lot of this happy-go-lucky game. But in the end, it wasn't quite a perfect piece of art, whereas I'd say especially this version of Catan was almost perfect in its art. Round 4, tie. Round 5, entertainment, thought, Machi Koro wins! This one was a landslide victory for Machi Koro, because what I realized was, going back to Settlers of Catan as a thinking person who hadn't played Settlers of Catan for a year or two, so the nostalgia of the game disappeared. Once the nostalgia was gone, I realized there's nothing to think through in this game. After one game of this, you realize the core of the game, and you realize that there's nothing you really want to do with the game. It's just frustrating. Whereas with Machi Koro, you want to think through the puzzle over and over again, largely because, like I said earlier, it's kind of like with communism, where you constantly have that argument of, was it really that the system didn't work, or was it that the betting didn't work? And all the cards have so many different connections that they can make to each other that there's always a different strategy or a slight tweak you could make to your strategy. Energy. Machi Koro wins! Settlers of Catan's energy is actually not really fun. We played it again last night just to remind me, and I used to play this all the time. This was a game I had like several versions of. I had played over and over again, and last night I was playing it, I just realized I would rather be playing Machi Koro, because a betting production game should be a highs and lows game, where in the lows you're going, oh man, I need this so badly, but you don't actually feel that bad because you know around the next turn is your good luck time. And in Catan, that's not the case. Once you get unlucky, the game's often just kind of over, and somebody else is just getting so far ahead that you can't catch up with them. Machi Koro is the polar opposite of this. I've had games where I am losing this so thoroughly, but yet, like I said, I always have that hope I can come back. And on top of having that hope, I'm sitting there and everybody at the table is laughing because the game encourages you to laugh. It looks like a fun, inviting game. It feels like a fun, inviting game. And with every loss, everybody at the table is laughing. And one of the biggest things I would say overall about energy is the length. Catan, the reason it feels like a slog is because it is. It's a long game. And for a game that's literally just betting, it would be like playing craps for hours and hours. And most people who play board games don't want to do that. Whereas with Machi Koro, you play for like a half an hour, and then you're done. And then you can play again if you want to, and maybe this time you do really well and somebody else does really poorly. You can't get that with Catan. Round 5. Machi Koro wins! Victor. Catan 2.3. Machi Koro 4.0. Machi Koro wins!
Settlers of Catan gets no.
We have Catan, which is not even in my recommendations. Now, before people get really upset at me, a 2.3 is a slightly below average score. A 2.5 is what I would consider an average board game. And I would consider Catan just slightly below an average board game. But this is the question I have for people who really love Catan, or even Carcassonne, or even Pandemic. If it wasn't the first game that you got introduced to, if it wasn't one of the earliest memories you had, if you took away that nostalgia, put it on your shelf, didn't think about it for a couple of years, and came back and actually played it and thought about it in comparison to another game, would you actually think that it was a good game? And if you did, would a lot of it be those fond memories of the times you played it before, and not what you're actually playing? I think the answer to that question is a resounding yes. And the reason I'd say that is because this was a game I loved. I had almost every expansion. I had 3 or 4 different versions of the game. I loved this game. But I realized the deeper I got into the hobby, the more I found that this game is not a well-designed game. It's a slightly below average game in a world of tons and tons of games that are better than it.
Machi Koro gets a golden recliner.
That means that I think it is one of the greatest beginner board games of all time. Machi Koro takes the same heart, the same feeling that honestly Settlers of Catan gives you, but instead of being long, boring, frustrating, and the same thing every time, Machi Koro gives you excitement, humor, this feeling that there's always that chance that you could pull off an upset that nobody was expecting. And a short enough game that even if you don't, you can just play another one, and the odds reset, and you start over with a clean slate. And I'd love to know in the comments whether you guys would like me to compare Machi Koro to its other versions in the future. Whether you'd like to see a fix, because I'm planning at the moment to maybe go through and see if I can fix some of the problems with Catan and make it a better betting production game. So let me know down in the comments whether or not you think I should do any of those things, and whether or not you agree with my assessment of these two games. Please hit that subscribe button. It really means a lot to me and to my wife who work together on this channel, and it's also an opportunity for me to continue working on this channel and continue making great content for all of you. And as always, thank you so much for joining us today on Rest and Reason. Also, guys, real quick heads up, there is a new part of Rest and Reason that I'm super excited to introduce, but I wanted to make sure to let you know about it here first. It is History Hot Takes. Now, I wanted to announce it first here because I wanted to first say that I will still be doing board game content. This is not taking the place of the board game content. But it is going to be something I'm going to try to put out once every week from here on. This content is very different from my board game content. Both of them involve thinking about things. One involves thinking about history, and one involves thinking about board games, but they have two very different tones. My board games aims to be more neutral, more kind, and more open so that everybody can enjoy the content, even if it is pressuring people to rethink things a little bit. My history hot takes are exactly that, hot takes. I am trying to make every single joke and thing that I can do to kind of put people going, ooh, oh, ooh, without going into something sexual, without going into something political. As much as I can, I'm just trying to laugh at everything, to make fun of everything. So if that doesn't sound appealing to you, I would encourage you to skip my History Hot Takes videos and continue watching my board game videos. If that sounds fun to you, if you think witty sarcasm is for you, then I believe that History Hot Takes will be something you enjoy a lot. So thank you so much, and I hope to have you all join me for History Hot Takes as well.